Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think we'll make a quick start. That lectern feels awfully a long way away from you all, so I'm going to stay here. And a little bit of informality, we might sit down even if it looks as though it needs to be a bit more informal. My name is Kate Nicholls. I'm Chief Executive of UKHospitality. I'm really pleased to be welcoming you to the Vision stage and the first of the sessions that we've got on here today as part of the HRC show. I know there's a great deal of insight, information, advice and guidance that's coming up, so it's a real privilege to be able to open the show for you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chief Executive of UKHospitality. That's the national trade body that represents hospitality owners, operators and employers. We have over 700 member companies. They cover all the types of businesses that you'll find at the show here. Primarily, we're there to represent the operators, the hospitality businesses, hotels, restaurants, catering, pubs, as well as the food supply chain. But we also have supplier associates who are in membership. So we cover everything from farm to fork, and we provide the advice and guidance that those businesses need to be able to grow and survive and thrive. And our role is primarily threefold. We're there to promote the reputation of the industry as a great place to grow, work and invest. And I think it's my privilege and honour to be able to be your voice and face to government, to the media, to the general public, to be able to present that. We are working to campaign on your behalf to get the supportive regulatory and fiscal environment that you need to thrive and grow. And then we provide a great deal of advice, compliance, guidance, insight, intelligence and horizon scanning to be able to future-proof your business and look at the challenges that are coming ahead, whether that's sustainability, whether that's workforce and people, but also consumer insights so that you can get the best quality information. So that's what we do in a nutshell. Our 700 companies represent over 100,000 outlets across the UK. And in membership, we have about 95% of the hotel, bar, restaurant, pub, nightclub, cafe environment. And it's that breadth and depth of membership that gives us that powerful one united voice to take to government. Now, this 3 years that we've had has been the most turbulent and challenging that I've ever experienced in 30 years of working in hospitality. Actually, I think the current environment that we've got is the most challenging. But what I'm going to do is give you a quick overview, a snapshot of the areas that we're working on, the current insight and intelligence that we're sitting on that looks about why there might be causes for optimism, and then talk about the 3 key areas that we're working with government on over the next 12 to 18 months as we head into a general election to try and get the right climate we need and to make sure that hospitality is recognised as the strategically important business and sector of the economy that it is. I've asked me to talk for about 15 minutes, which will give 15 minutes for Q&A, and I know there'll probably be quite specific areas that people want to focus on, and I'll do my best, and then I am around for a little bit afterwards, but I've got to dash over to the sustainability stage to speak again at 11 o'clock. So if I dash off, please come and find one of my team, or send us an email. You can send it to ceo@ukhospitality.org.uk and we will get back to you. But first, the headlines. Although it is a very challenging time at the moment, we ended 2022 in quite a positive state. And I think it's testament to the resilience, the innovativeness, the dynamism and the vibrancy of our sector that we ended 2022 with higher revenues than we went into the pandemic. 136 billion pounds generated. Now, that is obviously not sufficient to be able to cover the intense costs, but 136 billion pounds is up on 2019 levels of revenue, and that's bigger than aerospace, automotive and pharmaceuticals put together. So significant growth generator for the UK economy. We also hit record employment levels. We added an extra 250,000 jobs to the sector, and those are new jobs. Net new jobs. So we're back to 2.6 million people directly employed in the sector, a further 500,000 casual and temporary and seasonal staff, and 1.5 million in the supply chain. Third largest private sector employer in the UK and the third largest export earner in the UK. Our foreign visitors and tourists coming over to eat and drink out in our venues spend more eating and drinking out and socialising than all of our food and drink exports put together. And that's my elevator pitch as to why the government needs to take us seriously and needs to provide the support for that key economic generator to be able to thrive and survive. But of course, we're so much more than just the economics. There's the social, the cultural and the community aspects of it too, where we are at the heart of delivering good quality jobs, investment and growth in our high streets, in our communities and in our neighbourhoods. Now, there are a couple of reasons why I think 2023 could be a really positive year for us going forward. That's not just because we've got those major events of the coronation and Eurovision, although those will be important focal events for the community where we will be again at the heart of the community. The first is that global travel is back, and that threat after 3 years that we might be closed down, that restrictions might be put back in place, that our foreign visitors won't be able to come, has been dissipated. Just to put it in context, although I said 2022 was positive, we are down in terms of volume. So in domestic hospitality, although we're above 2019 levels of revenue, we're at 85% of footfall. In tourism and our international tourism, we're at 70% volume and value. So that gap that we've got, that bit that's holding us back even further, is our foreign visitors, and in particularly our international business visitors. Shows like this are still relatively new and came back the last, and foreign visitors are still coming back in their droves. We're 5% down on North American visitors, and they are quite high spend because the value of the pound and versus dollar is quite positive. Our Southeast Asian visitors and our GCC Arab visitors not yet back in those volumes. China, 99% down in 2022, but the really positive news is their travel restrictions have ended. I think with China lifting travel restrictions and New Zealand and Canada lifting vaccine passports, that threat to international travel and tourism gone for good, I would argue, even if we have another wave, even if we have a new pandemic. The anticipation is that Chinese numbers and Chinese visitors, they're coming back fast and they're spending big. So traditionally, when we've come out of lockdowns, what we've seen is people travel in their local area, then they expand it to their region, and then they go global. Chinese visitors are coming back global in a big way. And the forecast is that we will be back to pre-COVID levels of Chinese visitors and their spending power by Chinese New Year next year. So that's a really rapid recovery rate that we're seeing. Secondly, you've got that magic elixir of consumer confidence coming back as well. What we're looking at there is that consumers, although they are concerned about the cost of living, are still prioritizing eating and drinking out. That's their top thing that they say they will spend on when they've got some disposable income. And the really positive news is consumers are very bad at predicting what their disposable income is going to be. We've been doing a consumer price tracker, a pulse point, with CGA since last summer when cost of living really became the top priority issue for economists globally and domestically. And we've been looking and asking customers, how much do you think your household expenditure is going to increase? And then we ask them the next month, did you reduce your spend by as much as you anticipated? The positive news is they're always much more gloomy, but they don't reduce their spend by as much. And so far, because of the positive signs that we've had coming through from the national economic picture, that spend is holding up. Visitor numbers are holding up, and particularly it's coming from our most loyal customers. So when it comes to eating and drinking out on the high street, but also hotel stays and overnight stays and day trips and visits, spend holding up from those people who come out and are most loyal. So those are our highest spending people. The people who are cutting back are those who come less than once a quarter. And they're trading down, they're not trading out altogether. And increasing numbers in December and January, around 4 out of 10 customers were telling us that if they had any disposable income, they would spend it first on the high street eating and drinking out, second on day trips, third on holidays. Last week, when I got the data in for February, that's jumped up to six, nearly 7 out of 10 saying they will spend in the high street eating and drinking out. And although the budget last week didn't contain much good news for the industry and sector-specific support, it did contain quite a lot of good news for consumer confidence that will help to rebuild it. We seem to be over, cautiously, say it gently. I'm not saying there's green shoots, but the soil is undoubtedly warm. There seems to be good news on the economy. The idea that technically we will avoid a recession. If you're a business person, technically avoiding a recession is really economic flatlining, and it's not great. But if you're a consumer and you hear that, that gives you a sign that it's not going to be as bad. Your mortgage isn't going to be as high. Your interest rates are not going to be as high. You can be confident. And the third reason for confidence is that unlike any other recession that I've worked through and in, this is a full employment recession. We are not seeing any tick up in unemployment. We are not seeing major job losses. We are seeing contagion around some of the financial services and some of the tech companies, but those job losses are rapidly being absorbed. And that means that consumers are feeling a little bit more confident about the money in their pocket. And that's what we rely upon to be able to push forward with that recovery. So potentially signs that we are over the worst from what the Chancellor was saying yesterday. Now, 3 key big areas that we're focused on in talking to the government that could hold us back. And we talked to the government about the opportunity. I know there's still a lot of challenge. I know the industry is still in recovery mode. I know there is a big hump to get over, but governments don't save dying industries. So our message to the government is we are the best bet. If you want to halve inflation rapidly, if you want to get the economy growing again, which are 2 of the Prime Minister's priorities, and then the Chancellor bizarrely has a prescription of 4 E's for the economy. Never known anybody take 4 E's without something there for the come down afterwards. But nevertheless, the Chancellor's 4 E's, employment, entrepreneurship, education, everywhere. There is no better prescription for hospitality being the answer and why we deserve that support to get through what will be undoubtedly a very tricky 6 months. So that's our message to the government. Pre-COVID, we were forecast to grow 5% year on year. Last year, the forecast was downgraded to 3%. But if you've got anemic growth with the economy flatlining, I take 3% any day from a mature sector of the economy that has proven that it can deliver in these areas. So the 3 key areas that we're talking to the government about, the 3 challenges that my team are pushing around. Firstly, there's cyclical challenges. You don't need me to tell you that the inflationary cost price environment is the worst and the most challenging it's ever been. We are still facing into those considerable headwinds, and they will undoubtedly get worse in April as national living wage kicks through, but also you've got the drop-off in the support for energy. We're working flat out to try and get support from the government to help businesses over that hump so that we don't have a big price and inflationary spike coming through in April. And there is ongoing work with Ofgem in particular to get regulation, effective regulation of the energy suppliers, to tackle the issues to do with security deposits, high access and standing charges that are meaning our bills are still higher than they should be. So far, we've got energy bills quoted in the market today at around 20 to 25p for electricity. Half of businesses in the sector contracted at 63p in the second half of last year. So that's a huge increase in costs likely to come through. And secondly, the conversation that we're having with the government there is about, can we make sure we've got better advice and guidance, better tax guidance in particular, so that more of our investment in people, place, product, our businesses qualifies for that 100% write down. It cannot be right that the 3rd largest sector of the economy doesn't get the benefit when it invests considerably because of an old-fashioned, outdated assumption that plant and machinery only refers to tools and machinery in factories. We need more of our investment able to be expensed. Secondly, there's a structural issue that we've got that we need help with. We are overtaxed when it comes to business rates. We are 5% of GDP, but we pay 20% of business rates because, again, you've got an outdated assumption that's based on 1980s bricks and mortar, not 21st century clicks and mortar businesses, and the online community doesn't pay its fair share. So we need that structural reform of business rates in order to unlock our investment back to our high streets, town centres and city centres, which have struggled the most during COVID and where we are seeing a real donut effect, particularly exacerbated by the ongoing impact of train strikes and travel disruption. So we're pushing around that to get a fairer deal and to get those hospitality allowances in business rates baked in so we've got confidence to go forward. And thirdly, strategic. This is where there are tough political choices that we need the government to be making around labour shortages. At the moment, half of our businesses are restricting their hours of opening, their days of opening, their capacity. They are turning away event bookings. They are turning away hotel room bookings because they do not have the labour to meet demand. And that means as an economy, we're losing £25 billion of revenue that we would otherwise make. And the Exchequer is losing £7 billion of tax revenue that would otherwise fund vital public services. And I would suggest we cannot afford to continue doing that. It's not sustainable. So if we want to get back to growing at the levels that we could grow at, and we want to lift those 2 arbitrary constraints on growth, we need the government to step in and help around access to labour. Some of the changes that were announced in the budget on childcare, on over 50s will help, but we really need root and branch reform of the apprenticeship levy to give us the funding to invest in training. And we do need a grown-up, common sense discussion about the immigration policy to make sure that it is fit for purpose with the shortages that the economy has. Because with 1 million vacancies and insufficient people out of work filling those vacancies, the inescapable conclusion is that we do not have access to the labour we need to meet all of the demands of the economy. And for the whole of the last year, hospitality has had a 10% vacancy rate. That's 1 in 10 vacancies taking longer than 6 months to fill. And that's what's holding us back considerably. So that's the area that we're discussing, not just with the government, but also with the opposition. Some of these are not quick fixes. They are going to take longer term strategic reform. And some of that is pushing out towards the general election, which is likely to come May next year. So we do need a plea to all of the operators in the industry and in the room. We need to engage with the political audiences to make sure that we get the change we need to continue to thrive and survive. And if we do that, then we can get back to that growth trajectory that we had pre-pandemic. We can get back to delivering 6 or 7% of GDP, 11% of employment, £10 billion investment each year in our high streets. 1 in 3 net new jobs is what we created in the decade post the financial crash, 1 in 5 last year. And we can get back to delivering really good quality hospitality and accelerating and growing under our own steam without handouts, but delivering back for the community and the economy and society to make sure that we are equipped to face the challenges of the 21st century. I'm going to pause there because I'm conscious that I've thrown a lot of stats at you. I've thrown a lot of overview at you, and undoubtedly you will have specific questions that you want to pose to me about what we need to do and the areas that we're looking at. But thank you very much for your time and attention. Anybody got a question? Oh, and I've only gone over 3 minutes, so I haven't eaten into question time. Are there any questions that I can help with or areas that you want me to expand on? Yeah. You can just shout at me and I'll repeat the question.
Can you talk a little bit about the
first quarter trading conditions so far, performance to date? Much better than expected. I mean, I think, if you're looking at the high street, January and February, eating and drinking out, pub visits, restaurant visits, those are traditionally our quieter months. December, we would normally over-index at about 120%. January and February is 80% of a normal level. It was quite quiet at the start of January, as you would expect, but it has picked up since around 14th, 15th of January, and there was quite a boost around half term, which was spread over 3 weeks so it's across the country. So it's a little trickier, but it's the first time in 3 years that we've had real terms growth. So we ended December around 106% of 2019 revenues. My estimate was you would need 120% to stand still in the current cost inflation environment. We got to 122, 130 over the month between mid-January to mid-February, and it's carried on since then. I don't have the latest figures for March, but that trajectory really quite positive, and footfall starting to come back more strongly. In the hotel sector, again, quite quiet months, but hotel visits are strong. Forward bookings are strong. The key thing is around hotels, events, business conferences and events. The issue that's hitting there is the confidence to book sufficiently far in advance because of issues to do with train strikes and travel disruption, and the announcements around Heathrow and passports not helpful. Consumers are now having to get used to the fact that hotels, event organisers, sporting events and music are going to enforce their cancellation policies. All those cancellation policies were voided during COVID. We gave money back. We allowed people to postpone penalty-free. Consumers are taking that quite hard, that people are enforcing cancellation charges now because they have to. But that means that there's less confidence about forward booking. So the booking window time has shortened. That came through during COVID. It hasn't changed, and we're still seeing very short booking windows. And equally, we're seeing acts and sporting events deciding to put events on quite short notice. Does that help? Yes?
Morning, James from IGD. I wonder if you could say something more about what businesses can do to help themselves around labour and the labour challenge?
Yes, of course. There's a huge amount that the industry is doing to address labour shortages. And I think most businesses that I've been dealing with, particularly through the trade association environment, have done a bit of a COVID reset or did a COVID reset last year. So they looked again at hours, standard shift patterns. Lots of them got rid of split shifts or double shifts. They went to more long-term planning for rotas. All of that has a bigger impact, we're hearing from workers, than issues just to do around price and pay, although wages have gone up by around 11 to 13% in the last 2 years. So pay and conditions tackled. People are looking at other in-work benefits, particularly around food, support with housing, support with deposits. A lot of people have looked at, again, these are variable according to businesses, trying to get people to be attracted. And then we've worked really closely with DWP to make sure that we've got a really compelling message back about training, professional development, career opportunities, moving through very rapidly from entry level and upskilling. So careers boot camps, skills boot camps, career starter apprenticeships have been launched in the last year, all trying to overcome some of these issues. And then the final point, we're just launching an employee wellbeing charter so that the hospitality industry as a whole can make a commitment that if you come and work with us, we will invest in you in training, we'll provide fair terms and conditions, we'll be transparent about what we're offering you, and we'll provide those meaningful career opportunities. And that kind of pledge and promise is helpful in terms of changing perceptions of the industry incrementally. Over and above that, we're then working on the qualifications, vocational training, and an entry-level induction standard that will be common training, freely available to all. So again, we can professionalise the sector. Any other questions? Do you want to just shout at me if you haven't got the microphone?
Hi, Kate. It's Nicola Knight from IGD. It's great to hear that we're back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of revenues in hospitality now. I wondered if you know whether we're back to the same outlet numbers as we had.
Same number of
outlets.
So yeah. No, we're not. We shrunk quite considerably. So we lost 10% of outlets during the 18 months of COVID. So that's about 10,000 outlets that went then. 25% of town and city centre restaurants closed as outlets during the pandemic period. And then the last year we had a further 5% contraction, so 5,000 outlets going. Now those are net closure figures. So net closure figures are driven by outlets closing, but also outlets opening. And in a normal, healthy market, you would have churn at the bottom. You would have churn of independents and single site operators. There is always a degree of business failure. The worrying thing is we're not seeing investment coming into the sector and companies expanding or taking up those sites or new entrants. So that's why the net closure figures are higher than we've seen for a while. Quite concerningly, 5,000 outlets, there's less than 1% of pubs closed, about 7% of restaurants, getting up towards 10% in late night nightclubs. That was in the last year. The worrying thing was that 2/3 of those happened in the last 6 weeks of 2022. That's really unusual. We don't normally have business failures then. That's when people cling on to get through Christmas, and then this quarter is the bad quarter. But we had 70%, so that's definitely driven by energy. Those energy costs came unsustainable and people closed overnight. 90% of those failures across the whole of the year were independents. Does anybody else have any particular questions? So that was what can UK Hospitality do to help the independents who are starting up new businesses? There's a massive amount of information and guidance available free of charge on our website. We also work with our partners at Visit Britain. We have a pink book which talks about regulatory advice and guidance. So on our website, you'll find common employment policies and toolkits, recruitment policies and toolkits, food safety guidance and compliance, so you can make sure you're legal from day one. We're working on advice and support to help financial resilience, to look at where you can get funding from and where you can get business support. And then most of the focus is then on how you grow rather than how you set up a business. But there's a lot that's available. And also government has set up a hospitality sector council, which is looking at creating a hub where all that information will be in one place. Anybody else got any things that they'd like me to expand on or speculate on, or anything you want to ask about politics?
Hello. I was just wondering, you were hoping in the budget they might reduce VAT again. Have you sort of given up on that hope now?
Haven't given up. VAT would be the strongest measure that the government could introduce that would have a meaningful difference. It would drive down inflation because it would stop our prices having to go up. It would give businesses that shot of oxygen to be able to invest. We are the only country in Europe that does not provide a lower rate of VAT for hospitality and tourism services. So definitely haven't given up on that, because we know it is the game changer. And crucially, it's the measure that our businesses tell us was the single most effective measure in keeping businesses afloat during the pandemic. So haven't given up on it. Always thought it was really, really unlikely in the current budget that we've just had, because of the state of the public finances. If you're going to give, if you were to cut VAT by the rate that it was cut before, costs about £6 to £8 billion per annum. If you were going to prioritise where you could spend that amount of money, I would have thought it was unlikely that they would have done it in hospitality this time round, even though we know it would help generate lots of cash and income. So I think with the government's priorities, the state of the public finances, public sector worker pay, I always thought it was unlikely, but we pushed hard for it during the budget and will continue to campaign for it in the run up to the general election. But it needs everybody in the industry to get behind it and say that's what they want, and to write to their MP and tell them what a difference it would make. You had another question down here. And then you want a second go at the front. Okay.
All right. Thanks for all your work, by the way.
Thank you.
I read about you a lot. So just a question about immigration. So visa sponsorships, I heard that it was going to get relaxed a little bit. Can you expand a bit more on that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And then there's a gentleman down at the front wants a second go at the question. But sponsorships, again, a bit like the question around VAT, do I think that the current government with Suella Braverman in charge and a focus on small boats in Rwanda is going to relax the immigration regime considerably? No, I think that's politically challenging for them to do. There is, however, a review of the shortage occupation list and eligible jobs list. None of hospitality jobs are on that shortage occupation list. That would allow you to bring people in more easily at perhaps a lower skill level or a lower salary level. That review closes on the 26th of May, and it's possible the government will look at some tweaks and changes. But I think for the short term and the medium term, we're going to be stuck with the skilled visa route that we've got, and it'll be about making sure that we can fit around that. Again, there's a lot of information and advice on our website. We've got a webinar that we did with immigration lawyers. I think a lot of that, but I've done the application myself. 95% of it is common sense. 5% you need some specialist knowledge of immigration law, and we have to be flexible, and we really need to be creative in the way that we describe our jobs to be able to get skilled visas through. So there's advice and guidance on our website about how to do that. We're pushing for the costs to be reduced as well, because for most smaller businesses, it's the cost that is the single inhibitor.
Thank you. Can I ask two questions? One is an observation, obviously, that the cost increases on the sector have been rampant and have already happened. How has the sector been able to react in getting its prices up so that you can pay these enhanced costs?
Sorry, I'm just looking at where you're from, so I know.
That's irrelevant.
Okay.
The second question is, how has the supply chain been able to respond and react to a recovery in hospitality demand? Because the supply chain's had a rough time for a couple of years.
Yeah, I would humbly suggest that the supply chain has had nowhere near as tough a time as hospitality. However, we are only as strong as the weakest link. And so we need to work holistically to make sure that we all get through this. And the simple and knee-jerk reaction of suppliers to pass additional onerous conditions security deposits and additional charges down to the hospitality businesses. We need to work collectively to make sure that we've got that addressed in a fair and balanced way so that the risk is shared and that we don't unwittingly, unknowingly put those businesses out of pressure, because it ties back to the first part of your question. Yes, we face considerable cost pressures. This time last year, when we were going into the war in Ukraine and the supply chain pressures, we were already facing input cost price inflation of 13% in the hospitality sector. It jumped to 22% by the end of last year, fueled by those increases being passed through by food and drink suppliers and energy suppliers. So that is a particularly big challenge. So we already had a lot of cost price inflation, and there is a tendency to pass it all on to the hospitality chain in a way that does not happen in the supermarket and off-trade environment. So we just need a caution. What we've been able to do, there is no way we can pass on those level of cost prices. Food and drink price inflation has been double digits since February last year. It's currently hit 24%. Energy cost price inflation hit 150% this time last year, escalated up to 600%. There is no way you can pass on those cost prices. In April last year, the sector as a whole passed through an average cost price increase of 10%. That's still not standing still. But we know from research we've done that if you put it up by more than 6%, you nudge consumer behavior to trading down, trading out, not spending as much. So you've got a law of diminishing returns. It's a real challenge to keep that price and to avoid that going up further. And with the cost of living squeeze now coming through, second half of last year, what customers were telling us was that the price increases were the thing that was stopping them going out. Now it's their own cost price inflation and their own cost of living that's stopping them going out, not so much the cost prices that we're charging. But we need to be cautious about it because you can't pass that on. And that's why you're seeing so many outlets going pop and no new outlets coming through into the market until that stabilizes. So started with the positive. That's a really gloomy end. Any other final questions? I know we're out of time, but if anybody does want me, I am around shortly afterwards, and then otherwise I can pick up, and my team are around, and you can get in touch with us through the website, through Twitter. Thank you for your time and attention, and if there's anything I can do, please do shout.